the words of God the Seer has so many affinities with the book of Revelation, I assume that both books come from the same time, and even from the same area, which is from Israel, the land of Israel.
Shalom and welcome to Hebrew Voices. I'm here today with Professor Meir Bar-Ilan at Bar-Ilan University. He's a professor in the Talmud department and the Jewish history department. Shalom, Professor Bar-Ilan.
Shalom, shalom, Dr. Gordon.
I have to start with the question, how is it that your name is Bar-Ilan and you're at Bar-Ilan University, and the university was founded by a man named Meir Bar-Ilan, but not by you? This can't be a coincidence.
This is not a coincidence. We both, me and the university, me first because I'm older, we are named after my late grandfather. I was born in 1951. The university was born in 55, 56. So I had the privilege to be a lecturer at Bar-Ilan University, and believe me, not because of my nice eyes.
Okay. Well, Bar-Ilan University is my alma mater, where I earned my PhD, my doctorate. So there's a place in my heart for it. I want to talk to you today about a book that's certainly not known in the English-speaking world, and frankly isn't really even known in the Hebrew-speaking world, which is a book that you researched and worked on, the book of the words of Gad the Seer, or for my English-speaking audience, it's Gad, not G-O-D, but G-A-D, Gad HaChozeh, Gad the Seer. And this, tell us, what is this book? Where was it found? When was it written? And how did it reach us?
Okay, these are too many questions. Some of them are highly...
No, it's a lot.
A lot of questions, and some of them are highly complicated. So let's make it things that are easy to understand. We will begin first. So first, who was God? God, as you said, G-A-D, was a private prophet or a seer to King David. So we are talking about a person who lived about 3,000 years ago. Period. That's it. So he and King David are the protagonists of the book, The Words of Gad the Seer. Now, in the Bible,
so he's mentioned in the Bible, for example, 1 Chronicles 29:29. It mentions the words of Samuel the seer and Natan the prophet and Gad the seer.
But what is more interesting is the fact that in the book of Chronicles, at the end of the first Chronicles, it is stated that the prophet Samuel wrote his book with, he makes a kind of a reference, like in modern studies, and he said that one of the books he was using was Divrei Gad HaChozeh, Words of Gad the Seer. Now,
so it's one of the sources of
the book of Samuel.
The book of Samuel. Okay. So Chronicles is saying that, is mentioning that there's this book. Okay.
Now, first, there are certain people who do not believe this colophon or this statement, which is one of the problems to understand the sources of the book of Samuel, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. Furthermore, some scholars think that most the attributed books that are mentioned in the book of Chronicles, because there are many others, one shouldn't believe them. It's a kind of a virtual library. But this is, again, not the issue here. At any event, we never heard, after the book of Chronicles that mentioned Words of Gad the Seer, we never heard anything about it until the 18th century. It's a kind of a lost and found, a kind of. We do not know. We do not know. So
let me take a second here for the audience to read this verse, because I'm not sure they understand what we're. So this is in 1 Chronicles 29:29. I'll read it from the JPS. The acts of King David, early and late, are recorded in the history of Samuel the seer, the history of Nathan the prophet, and the history of Gad the seer. And you're saying that some scholars look at that and say Chronicles is just making up sources. It didn't really have a book in front of it called the Book of Gad the Seer.
Right. Furthermore,
Some scholars are saying that. You're not saying that.
most of the Book of Chronicles you shouldn't believe. So this is not the issue. I'm not going to discuss the issue here, but we should think.
You're saying that's the view of many scholars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it depends. At any event, we are talking now about a person that lived in the times of King David, that is the 10th century BCE.
Mhm.
And in the Bible itself, it is a book was attributed to him, and that book disappeared. So we, the Jewish people, and anyone who knows anything about classical world of literature, we know that most books from antiquity were lost during the ages. Some claim that it's about what we have at hand. For example, if we are thinking of Aeschylus or Aristotle or any classical work that we have at hand today, some say that we have only about 2% of what was circulated in antiquity. We do not know. It's a surmise. We do not know. So, but the Jewish people, since we had a lot of tragedies during the ages, it is most understandable that books could be lost. Very simple to understand that. Now, we have no idea, nothing like that is mentioned in the Talmud or the Midrashim, so we cannot verify, we cannot say anything about that book. So, after a long silence of about, according to this scheme, of about 2,800 years or so, here it comes that in Cochin, India, that is, if one think of India as the subcontinent as a kind of a triangle, so down and west of India, there is a place named Cochin, southern to Goa, or in the land of Malabar. And there was a Jewish community that lived there for many centuries, at least, if they are not from the days of the Talmud, that is the Roman period, so at least at the 10th century, a Jewish community was established there.
Wait a minute. So you're saying they could be from Talmudic times. Could they be older than that? Like, for example, it talks about how Solomon sent merchants to Ophir, and some people have said Ophir is Sri Lanka.
Okay, now first, let's make it clear. Ophir is not Sri Lanka.
Okay. Where is it?
Okay. Who said it's Sri Lanka? I'll tell you privately. But the bottom line is, here's another coincidence I'm talking about. I am looking for Ophir for decades. I began my studies on this subject ever since I discovered this manuscript in 1981. And now I can assure you, and I'll send you my paper on it, that Ophir is Sopara, or Nala Sopara, which is about 30 miles northern to Mumbai.
So it's in India.
It's in India. Sure.
Okay. So there's, and the significance there again for people is that Solomon sent out some kind of a trade mission with boats from Eilat to a place called Ophir to get gold.
Absolutely. And we are talking about northern India, not southern India. It makes a lot of a difference during those times.
So is it possible that there were Jews in Ophir or Israelites in Ophir, meaning like maybe not a lot, but there was at least a trade mission or something that might have permanently been there?
No doubt there were Jews there, but I do not think that these Jews, well, some say that people that are named, the community that is called Bnei Israel, are descendants of these mariners who went there, the Judeans and people from Phoenicia that came together in a joint venture to Ophir, that is, as I told you, about Sopara, north to Mumbai. They could have been their Jews, but we are not talking about a community or Jewish community there. We are talking about a much different community. Just as there is no connection between Jews or non-Jews, whoever, in New York to Dallas, there are no connection whatsoever between Jews in Cochin and Mumbai. So let's go to Cochin. So in 18th century Cochin, there was a community, and among these people lived their leader, a rabbi, and most of all, a merchant. Whoever knew him, all of them non-Jews, described him as a very unusual person and said very nice, unusual things about him. His name was Cheskel Rahabi. Now,
how do you say
Rahabi, Resh, Het, Bet, Yud. Rahabi, probably a descendant from Yemen, where there is a district or a county named Rahaba. By the way, many people, there are many, the name Rahabi is well known among Yemenites until this very day in Israel.
Okay. And it wouldn't be surprising that a Jew would come from Yemen to India, because that was part of the international trade route, right?
Definitely. That's not surprise at all. I want to explain it. Very simple. Because if you take a ship at that time, I mean, in the Middle Ages and even before that, from around the 4th century BCE until the 16th century and even later, if you take a boat from Aden, which is in southern Yemen, and you don't do anything, just make sure that the sails are well enough, and after about, you don't do anything, after about 40 days, you land in the land of Malabar. Very simple. And if it's not Cochin, it's a bit northern or a bit southern to Cochin. So there were connection, not only that, it's these connections were not only of trade, but of marriage and even more, and even Torah.
I'm sorry, so what was the word there? Or what?
Marriage each other. Oh.
And by the way, there's a Torah scroll at Cambridge that I've personally examined, which also came from the Malabar coast, and it's 100% a Yemenite Torah scroll.
That's it.
If it wasn't written in Yemen, it was written by a scribe from Yemen.
That's absolutely.
Probably it was written in Yemen.
Absolutely, because many people in Cochin, not all of them, but many of them came from Yemen, and we know that from their names, like Saidi, for example, is definitely a Yemenite name.
Okay, so a lot of the Jews in Cochin have roots or connections with India.
Absolutely.
With Yemen,
absolutely.
rather.
And not only that, during the 18th century, the people in Cochin and people in Mocha, that is Mocha, after which the well-known coffee is named.
Really?
Yeah. This is of today's Moha in southern Yemen. They were a kind of twin towns. And twin towns. That they were
twin towns. Okay.
Both.
They were sister cities, you're saying, Cochin and Mocha.
And they even made a kind of a festival at Cochin in memorandum of things that happened to their forefathers at Mocha.
So we have this Yechezkel Rahabi, who is a Yemenite Jew in Cochin in the 18th century.
And who is a leader and a financier and also a Talmid Chacham, and he held in his hands many books. One of them was the Divrei Gad the.
Okay, so he has this book, The Words of Gad the Seer.
But he said nothing about that scroll, probably because he was too busy with his business. So 2 generations passed, and about 1806, an Anglican missionary came to, by the name Claudius, the Reverend Claudius Buchanan came to Cochin, and he bought there several manuscripts. He bought there, he went there twice, by the way, and in 1806 and in 1809, and he bought there about 50 manuscripts. And after he
bought there, saying he bought and then he brought them back to England.
And then after a few years later, he came back. He came back to England and he donated his manuscript to his alma mater at Cambridge.
Okay. So, for example, the Torah scroll I mentioned says on it, it was brought by Buchanan.
That's it. That's the person.
From the Malabar coast.
That's the person. And by the way, he went there. He went there in purpose. He was sure. He was a learned person, and he was sure that he's going to find texts among the Jews and among Christians, because there are Christians in southern India, Christians from antiquity, not from the Portuguese. That is, they are called Christian, St. Thomas Christians. And he was sure, Buchanan was sure he will find their manuscript with highly valuable for scholarship of the New Testament or the Old Testament. I cannot recall what he preferred, but at any event, he brought all the manuscript to Cambridge, and even one scholar at Cambridge even wrote his master's degree it's a kind of anachronism. It wasn't master's then, but he wrote a project on the book, a scroll of Chashiaresh or Megillat Achashverosh, and I can give you the bibliography if you are interested in that. It's a kind of additions to the scroll of Esther. But nothing happened with the manuscript he brought to Cambridge, and they were there for about 80 years, almost 80 years. They were taking dust, waiting for a scholar to be learned, and then came Solomon Schechter. Solomon Schechter came to Cambridge. He came there about 1890, around that year. He came there from Berlin, if I'm not mistaken, at the time, after he finished I think Wien. No, I think in Wien. He finished.
He came from Vienna. And for those who are like, for those wondering where they remember this name from, I've done programs on the Cairo Geniza, and Schechter was one of the great catalogers and discoverers of the Cairo Geniza.
But before he discovered, so to say, he did not discover the Geniza, by the way, but he popularized it. Let's put it this way. Before he was affiliated with the Geniza, he was looking for manuscripts, a Jewish manuscript at Cambridge, and he wrote a series of papers on Hebrew manuscripts at Cambridge, and he also paid attention to this scroll of Divrei Gad the that came from Cambridge, and he dedicated about
And just to be clear, today what he had access to is a codex, in a book form. It's not an actual scroll, right?
It looks, that's correct. It looks like a codex. No, it's not looks. It is a codex, but it looks like it as if it was copied from a scroll. Very unusual. Very unusual. It looks very unusual, and I'm telling you, even after 40 years of study it, more than 40 years, it is still unusual. I never seen anything like that. But if you look at it, you have the impression that it was copied from a scroll, which is highly probable. At any event, Schechter wasn't impressed by this manuscript. I mean, he said, well, it's nothing from the Middle Ages. All he had to say is something like that. That is degraded it, so to speak. And he couldn't say anything in particular about it.
Okay.
Now, about a generation passed, and his student, his name was Israel Abrams from England. He wrote a paper dedicated to his beloved teacher in a kind, he published it in a festschrift to somebody else. At any event, it was published posthumously. And because of that, his paper, according to my eyes, suffers from several errata. So, and by the way, it should be mentioned, because I want to say something good about Abrams. In his years before his death, the last years before his death, he lost his eyesight, and he had people to help him for looking at his academic work. So all I can say is that we have to excuse the errata in his paper. But the bottom line is that the book of Divrei Gad HaChozeh is a book from the Middle Ages, and we can see that it is. He continued the line, the thought line of Schechter, which is that the book is it reflects the Kabbalah of the Middle Ages.
Okay. So both Schechter and Israel Abrams are saying that the words of Gad the Seer
It's nothing. Don't look at it. It's
not important. It's influenced by Kabbalah from
something like that.
The Middle Ages. Okay. All right.
However, when I found...
And by the way, this is part of a broader prejudice in Jewish studies against Kabbalistic literature.
Absolutely.
Before Gershom Scholem.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because you tell me, oh, it's a 12th century Kabbalistic, proto-Kabbalah. Well, that's kind of really interesting.
I'm sure about it. I want to tell you something. First of all, let's say, until this very day, it's not easy to grasp and to tell for sure the date of this manuscript. So people are a bit frustrated or a bit... how should I say that? They are, well, it's only from Middle Ages. Listen, even from Middle Ages, it is text you never saw. So don't underestimate the manuscript. Now, at any event, this is not my line of thought, and I want to tell you the difference. When I found the paper of Abrams in a kind of serendipitously. That is to say, I went to look like King Saul, went to find the ass, the Atonot, and found the Melucha. He went to find the ass, and he found the kingdom. So I went to find something else, and it occurred to my heart.
This is referring to Saul searching for his father's donkeys.
Correct.
And he ends up as being anointed king. Okay.
But in my case, I never found any kingdom. All I found is a manuscript that already been noted, but not correctly understood. So what I did was, first of all, to copy it, to have it, all the text, to have it on my computer. And I already put it in my computer on 1984 on my first computer. Yes.
What kind of computer
that's
was
a
there
very
with
good
Hebrew in
question. A
1984?
very good question. Its name you never heard. Its name was Pied Piper. You never heard the name, I'm sure. And all those who are more affiliated with computers, all I can say right now is that it was on 7-bit. That is before the DOS. DOS is 8-bit, and later to be 64-bit and 128-bit. But I'm talking about 7-bit, which is the level of, so to speak, of the dragon. If some of the audience may ask their grandfather, what is 7-bit?
Okay.
Okay, so first of all, I copied all the manuscript, and at the time it took me a lot of trouble, a lot of time. At the time, I had only a microfilm and black and white, and it took me many years to study the text and to make all the comments, and then to realize what I'm going to do with it, how to publish it, and so forth. And after, to make a long story short, because it was really a long story, it took me more than 34 years of study until I published the manuscript with all the the commentary and anything that is needed to understand, and even with the English translation. Of course, with the English translation, because I wanted the audience, people who are not necessarily know Hebrew, who might find interest in this book, especially because it's a book on apocalyptic. It reflects an apocalyptic movement, if not a movement, at least a community of people, of Jews, that had visions, and they are this community who, I can say more than one author wrote this book, and all I can say about that community is that they were non-rabbinics. What it is exactly, it's a question, but let's put it this way. Today, we are aware of Judaism. So we think that in antiquity there was Judaism. The exact word to make it more, in a better understanding, is, according to Morton Smith and Jack Neusner, the exact word is Judaisms. So there were several kinds of Judaism, and the book of words of Gad the Seer came from such a community, which all I can tell you for sure, they were Jews, for sure. They believed in the Torah and a commandment, etc., but they were non-rabbinics.
So what century are we in? We're not talking about the actual Gad the Seer from the time of David, are we?
So now we are talking about pseudepigraphy. So what is interesting about this book is that in the first chapter, the author writes about himself. I am Gad the Seer. He names himself as if he lived in the 10th century. Unfortunately, I can tell you for sure after studying the text that the text is not from the 10th century BCE. Now, some may say, wow, if it's not, you can close the book and I'm not interested in the book. But from my point of view, this book belongs to a kind of such a library, a virtual library of pseudoepigraphy, because we know we have from antiquity all sorts of books that are attributed to biblical authors or biblical heroes or whatever. And this book, the only difference is that the other books came to us only through other languages, translations to Greek, Latin, Armenian, and so forth. And in this particular case, we have the book in Hebrew. So this is very unusual. And the Hebrew is also very unusual, which makes it so difficult to realize and to make it to make a definite conclusion concerning the question where when this text was written. So let's put it straight. It's not from the 10th century BCE. Now, I think, well, in my book, I made a long discussion of this subject, and I do not want to repeat myself. Let's put it this way. I prefer to think that the book comes from the 1st century BCE, of the Common Era. And what?
The 1st century CE or
correct.
AD, as
and it's after the destruction of the temple. And what really makes me in a kind persuades me is that it's heavily affiliated with the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, which was.
So the book of Revelation, the New Testament, which is from roughly.
It's not from roughly, according. Well, some scholars say they know exactly, and they think it's from 96, the year of 96. And if you do not want it from that year, it's also be good for me to say from the end of the 1st century. Let's put it this way. So, since the words of Gad the Seer has so many affinities with the book of Revelation, I assume that both books come from the same time, and even from the same area, which is from Israel, the land of Israel. Of course, no, the book of Revelation wasn't written in Israel, but the author originated from Israel. That's for sure, from the land of Israel. That's not the issue. The issue is that the words of Gad the Seer, it was written for sure in the land of Israel, and for many reasons, but not 100% persuasive, it comes from the 1st century or the beginning of the 2nd century. But both authors of the book of Revelation and the book of Words of Gad the Seer have a very similar background, and their Judaism is a Judaism of Apocalyptic Judaism. And
tell us what that means. What does it mean it's apocalyptic?
Apocalyptic is that they have.
I have an idea, but let's assume the audience doesn't know.
Very simple. Very simple.
Yeah.
The God the Seer describes himself as looking and seeing a vision. In his vision, he see a shepherd that is God. Looks like a shepherd, and on his head is a kind of a sun, and on his shoulder, he holds a lamb, and the lamb praises the Lord. What is it?
Places what?
Praises the Lord.
So he's holding a lamb on his shoulders, and a lamb is praising
only,
God.
not as you do it on your both shoulders, only on his right shoulder.
Oh, on one shoulder. And by the way, it's reversed on
later. I'll send
Zoom.
you
But
later.
here,
I'll send you
okay.
after we will finish the Zoom. I'll send you the text.
Yeah.
So what is interesting about it that it's a whole world of sea miles. Both books use the same treasure of apocalyptic literature. And so here is one vision. In the vision, God tells the seer about the future, and there is there are another two visions in the book. So the book has three different visions. Not only that, but the book, part of the book, was written by a professional scribe. And what is interesting about this specific chapter 7, Words of Gad the Seer, is that the author was aware that once the story in the book of Kings and the parallel in Chronicles are not the same text, they are not the same text. What he did was a kind of harmonization of both texts, making two texts into one. So what is interesting about this is that until now, when we talk about the Bible and its sources, we never saw any sources like that. It is just a kind of learned scholar who projects that there were sources. In this case, in Words of Gad the Seer, you can see it in your own eyes. You can see the source. We do know the source of Book of Kings. We know the source of, not King, of Samuel, and the source of Chronicles. And here you can see how he intermingles and makes harmonization each and every verse, which is it's so unique. There is nothing like that in the whole Hebrew literature.
Wow.
Yeah, it is wow. It is wow.
So
that's it. You see.
So
all what I have to say to Schechter and to Abrams is, before you degrade it, or before you make your statement about its affinities to Kabbalah or to this date or another date, first you have to study the text. You never saw anything like that. There is nothing like that in the whole Jewish literature. And first, look at it, and then make your observation or your comments or whatever. What they did was the vice versa. First, they made their comments, and then they moved away because they were busy to study other things. I wasn't like that. It took me, I admit, it took me many years, but I think that my study is a bit thorough. That's it.
So when you say it's apocalyptic, tell me if I'm understanding this right. You have an author who's describing a vision of sort of like he's taking a tour of heaven.
I want to correct. No, I'm sorry. I want more to. I want to make it more precise. The book has 14 chapters. Each chapter is a different literary unit, unlike the Bible. The Bible. So you have to discuss and to study each and every chapter from the very beginning. And I can approve, if you want me, that the book was written by more than one scribe, more than one author. Which tells us that we are talking not about one person, rather about a kind of a community. Well, let's talk about Jeremiah the prophet with his student, Baruch, who committed into writing his prophecies. So we are talking about Nevi'im and Bnei Nevi'im, the children of the intellectual children of the prophets. So here we have a same phenomena, and it is clear because, for example, the 4th chapter in Words of Gad the Seer is a folk story. It's a very interesting story. It is not apocalyptic. It's very interesting. But those who are interested in apocalyptic wouldn't find any interest in this chapter. And the other way around.
So parts of it are apocalyptic, where there's someone who's describing like sort of like a tour of the heavens or something like this, right?
Okay.
What do we mean by because some people hear apocalyptic, they say, the world's coming to an end.
And... No, not necessarily.
Okay.
It's true that some of the visionaries are related to heaven and hell, but this is not the case. This is not the case.
Okay.
And by the way, there is another vision. There are 2 different visions. Another one is about seeing the archangel Michael, translated literally, who is like God, with this, who makes a war against Samael and defeated him, which is...
Wait, so Michael or Michael is fighting against Samael,
correct.
which is
like
some maybe demon or
is a kind of a devil, a kind of the Antichrist, or whoever you want to call him. And there is another third apocalyptic vision where the seer is in heaven. He sees the heavenly tribunal that the Lord as a judge in the day of Rosh Hashanah. But it's not, it's a bit different than the rabbinic one. It's a bit different. It's non-rabbinic. It's similar. It's very, it is close, but it is not.
So the point I was trying to make is when the layman says apocalyptic, what they sometimes understand is the end of the world. But scholars are talking about a prophet who sees things in the heavenly realm that in a vision. Is that
apocalyptic is not necessarily the end of the world. It is more because the origin of the word is something that is hidden or concealed. That we are that we are able to look, to see. This is the meaning. So here, this is really what happens.
So how do you know it's non-rabbinic? That's very interesting to me.
Okay, so
give us some examples of things that wouldn't be rabbinic that are in the Gad the Seer.
First of all, I'll give you. First of all, it works on retelling the Bible, which is definitely not a biblical, rabbinic work. Then he make a statement that he hears a prophecy from the Lord. Once again, this is not rabbinic. Apocalyptic is non-rabbinic. Pseudepigraphy is non-rabbinic. Hagiography, which means we will describe a holy man and see his deeds during his lifetime, which is typical to Christianity, but it's very different in Judaism. We do not know any hagiography before the Middle Ages. So this hagiography about King David is very unusual and it's not rabbinic. He also used...
So you're saying the entire genre, the entire type of, for example, paraphrasing the Bible is not a rabbinical thing, for example.
Definitely.
Okay.
Then I did.
And you have that, for example, in like the Book of Jubilees, where it's retelling the Bible in a paraphrase sort of way. And
Correct.
but isn't to some extent, isn't that what the Targum does? It kind of paraphrases the Bible. Well, I guess not.
It is not.
Not
It's
to this
definitely
extent.
not. And
Okay.
if you feel that I didn't persuade you, it's okay with me. I'll send you my paper, and you.
But
If
so
you're
I'm
able,
more
you
interested.
make
So you
a
said,
concise.
yeah.
Yes, please.
So for example, you said there's something where it reflects something in Jewish law, and it's contrary to what's in the Mishnah. That was the example you didn't want to give.
Suppose one. Well,
Because it's probably very technical.
it's a rule in Mishnah in Bava Metzia. It's really beyond the scope here, but
Okay, it's probably too
definitely
technical.
not. But also, let's say epitaph of the Lord. How one is supposed to call the Lord. Here in this book, there are all sorts of nicknames, so to speak, to the Lord that are not known elsewhere.
Like, for example, what?
I'm sorry, not known in rabbinic world.
Okay, what would be an example of that?
Okay. Here, Shaddai and Tzvaot are known, but they are rabbinic, they are known in the Bible, but not in rabbinic world.
So in other words, nobody
a list of epitaph of the Lord, which is definitely non-rabbinic, because the rabbis prohibited that.
Wait, so I'm really interested in that, because that's kind of one of my areas of study. Where is that? I have your book here in front of me.
I'll send you my paper. I'll send you my specific paper.
No, but the list of epithets or titles of God, where is that in the
I think
Gad the
it's
Seer?
chapter 8 or 9. Let me open it and I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay.
And the book is here. The book is about 5,227 words. And it's not.
So, for example, I'm looking here at chapter 8 of your translation. I guess it's verse 183. Would that be right?
Wait a second until I find it.
Okay. Because that really is interesting to me.
Okay.
And while you're looking for that, so as part of what you're saying is that the book of Revelation in the New Testament is Jewish, but the way it's written is non-rabbinic. What's that?
It comes from Jewish origin, but non-rabbinic. We assume, we think that since Judaism, as we know it, is rabbinic, and we make a kind of reduction, all Judaism in antiquity was the same, and it wasn't.
So the book of Revelation is a certain type of literature that is a non-rabbinic. We don't find that in rabbinical literature, is what you're saying. Is that
but
right?
It comes from Jews in antiquity.
But then parts of Gad the Seer are the same genre.
Chapter. Is that?
Sorry to put you on the spot, but that's really interesting.
In chapter 8, as I told you, verse number 183.
Okay, let me read that from your translation. Okay. Guys, I'll put a link. This is page 9 in Roman numerals. He has the English translation of the words of Gad the Seer. And it says here, "Hear, O Israel, your God and my God is one, the only one and unique. There is no one like his individuality, hidden from all. He was and is and will be." Ooh, that's interesting. He fills his place, but his place doesn't fill him. He sees but is not seen. He tells and knows futures, for he is God without end, and there is no end to his end. Omnipotence, God of truth, whole worlds are full of his glory.
And you may go.
Wow. Oh, wow. What's that? Keep reading. All right. "And he gave each one free choice. If one wants to do good, he will be helped. And if one wants to do evil, a path will be opened for him. For that we will worship our God, our King, our Lord, our Savior with love and awe. For your wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and your cleverness is to depart from evil.
Also, please, Nehemia, please open verse, chapter 12, verse 267.
Okay, let me find that. All right. So this is on page Roman numeral 12, 267. Oh, so it starts out in 266. These are the words of David before his death, and he spoke unto the Lord and Israel, and he spoke, saying, verse 267, God, the blessed, the great, the only one, guileless, that's one of the titles of God here, just, dreadful, benefactor of the miserable, darling, the senior, Shaddai, holy, have mercy upon the vine, thine good inheritance. The Lord will answer us in the day that we call. So there's all these different titles for God, is what you're pointing out here.
Listen, right. Okay, I send you.
So that's so that's unusual. That wouldn't be found in rabbinical literature, that you'd have these series of titles.
That is correct. Not only that is not, you cannot find it, it is forbidden.
Tell us about that.
Okay, there is a story in the Jerusalem, the Palestinian Talmud, where it is stated that two rabbis went to southern villages in the land of Israel to לעשות shalom, that is to judge between people, and they heard a chazan who said, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא והאמיץ, etc., 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 and they stopped the chazan and told him, you are not allowed to do so. And therefore, what one says in his prayer is just the biblical epitaph, as האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא. Because one is not allowed to make more epitaph that are not found in the Bible.
So if God has certain titles in the Bible, you can't just start adding your own titles. Right. And so in the Jerusalem Talmud, they're rebuking this cantor for making up his own titles, which, by the way, shows somebody did it, right?
Of course.
So, but it was rejected by the rabbis, this type of thing. Fascinating. Wow, really fascinating.
By the way, the verse we just mentioned, 267, if I'm not mistaken, was found after I published my book with a special merit. That is to say that the words make a colophon, an acrostichon that is the initials of the ineffable name in Hebrew, Abag Yata.
Okay, so the first letter of each word or something spells Yud He Vav He. Wow.
Which is it's a kind of a secret concealed in the text.
Okay.
It's a kind of.
That's very cool. Wow.
For that, there is another paper.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much, Professor Bar-Ilan. This is absolutely fine. We're going to have you back on to talk about stellometry and some of the other topics. Because there's so much more fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.